Good morning, Kelly.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm good.
Well, welcome. I want to welcome everybody to Life Talk with Kelly and myself, Janice. Today, we're going to talk about some of the things that we work to include with every client's sessions. But last video, I talked about the first session really is what I include. But today, we're going to talk about Kelly's. The things that she tells most clients or shares with most clients, whichever way you want to look at it. And so, Kelly, what do you think the number one thing is that you tell or share with most clients?
Hello. I with the last video, I really liked that you did the first appointment, and I noticed how my list of things that I tell clients just rams it right in there. So what because I typically see the majority of people who have had trauma.
Mhm.
And so the number one thing I think I tell everyone is no one else's behaviors are about you.
Good point. Good point.
Because the way our brain works, our brain stores our experiences.
Mhm.
And we have behavioral and emotional reactions that we call triggers. That's a buzzword. Oh, I was triggered. Oh, I was triggered. Well, it's because of the memories that are stored in your brain, and your brain becomes dysregulated. So you have those behavioral or emotional reactions,
Mhm.
which can never be about someone else. If I have an outburst and I start yelling, my outburst isn't because of you, it's because of what's in my brain.
I've been meaning to talk to you about that too, though.
Which my old self was, because I had my own trauma, and I would become dysregulated and I would yell because that was my go-to. How I was raised, anger is what you use. And once I healed those triggers, I no longer do that. And someone else's behavioral or emotional reactions aren't about you because you aren't in their brain. It's what they stored in their brain.
Mhm.
I'll give you an example. I was in a store one time and we were in the garden center, and this guy was trying to return a lawnmower in the garden center. Well, that's not where you make returns. And there was a really young little cashier. She might have been 16, 17 years old. This guy is screaming at her at the top of his lungs. And she's in tears. He's screaming. Well, he's completely dysregulated. I don't know why. It's irrelative why he was. He just was. His behavioral and emotional reaction, which wasn't about her. It was about him getting triggered. And when he finally left, I just said to her, I said, I am so sorry that happened to you. That was never about you. It was about what was going on with him.
Mhm.
But we tend to personalize other people's behaviors.
Okay. So would you say that other people's behaviors we absorb as if we have caused them?
That possibly, um, I, when you're in a situation like that where someone is behaviorally or emotionally triggered, we become defensive
Mhm.
because we're trying to protect ourselves from their reaction.
Mhm.
And then we become that way too, if we have triggers in our own brain.
Mhm. Well, I don't know anybody who doesn't have some triggers.
If you haven't done your work, absolutely.
Yes. Yes. But even sometimes I think when you've done your work, it can take, depending on how many you have, it can take a period of time before those are all addressed.
Because our brain has two states. It has regulated and responsive to
Mhm.
situations, or dysregulated and reactive.
Mhm.
If you haven't healed your triggers, you're going to get dysregulated and reactive to situations.
Mhm.
And what I tell clients is the benefit of doing the work is that you now can choose whether to be dysregulated about a situation or appropriately reactive versus involuntarily reactive or responsive.
Mhm.
And just because of my own life, I prefer responsive. It doesn't mean I don't have an elevation, but doing my own work, what it gave me was I might have been around a 0, and when I got triggered, I would be at a 10,
Mhm.
automatically at a 10, and then it came out.
Mhm.
Now, if I feel something, I pay attention to what I'm feeling and I ask what it's about. Before I wasn't able to do that.
Mhm.
It's
So
just there.
0 to Mach 1 with your hair on fire without any stops in between.
Oh yeah. I used to say that I felt like a churning volcano all the time.
Mhm.
Most people wouldn't have known I was that angry, but I was. But my kids they would see it and they'd go, watch it, mom's gonna blow, and they would hightail it out of there. Rightfully so. And I don't have that anymore.
Mhm.
So I'll give you another example. I'd moved into a new office. I had new furniture, new rugs, new everything. And I came in, I'd only been there a couple of weeks and it had been raining. Well, I come in, I walk into the hall, and there are men coming out of my office. And they've got muddy boots on, so they're walking across my brand new light colored rug. And so I could feel it coming up. And I go into the playroom and the roof is leaked. And so half the playroom is flooded. And so I felt it. I was like, okay, what am I going to do with this? And so I just called the landlord and I said, here's the deal. I'm going to have to cancel sessions today because I can't have kids on a wet floor.
Mhm.
And you promised you would fix the roof. If this happens again, I will deduct the amount of sessions that I have to cancel from my rent. Thank you very much. Talk to you later. And hang up. And I was immediately back down to 0. I felt it. I handled it appropriately, told them what I was going to do, and then I was done. And I went on with my day.
And I want to know, you asked me the same question last time. How believable do you find that is for clients that they can get to that point?
I believe everyone can get to that point.
Well, I know you
believe it's
do.
immediately believable. I think there's some education about exactly what your brain does and where those dysregulated triggers come from. I think that's part of that process of helping people because, and this is my point of view, is I think the more understanding we have of the reason we act and behave the way we do, the better able we are to heal it. And I don't like the word fix because then it applies someone is broken, and I don't believe people are broken. I believe they have experiences that need to be healed.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
so I tell you, one of the challenging places that this I see more resistance with this information is with parents. And I remember a particular parent when I was working for you at that office.
Mhm.
That these parents had adopted these siblings,
Mhm.
and this mother was very reactive to these children. And I would say their behaviors aren't about you. Their behaviors are about their own life experiences of being flopped around in the foster care system for so long, being abused by their parents. That is the reason they act and behave the way they did. and she would not accept that those behaviors weren't about her. She personalized their behaviors, and she believed they were trying to get back at her for something. Yeah. And so it was very contentious, their relationship, and it ended up not being able to be repaired. And she gave the kids back because she could not get to the place where she didn't personalize their behaviors. No one's behaviors are about you. And we are a society of reactivity. We see it all the time in the news and everything. Another example I have is one time I was at the DHS office about to do a biofamily visit. And the foster dad comes in with the kid, and he's a huge guy. I'm only 5'6". He was like 6'3" or more, towered over me. And he starts screaming at me. I'm the worst therapist ever. I need to learn how to do my job. I mean, people are coming out of their offices because they don't know what's going on. I said, wow, I can tell you are really angry. Yes, I'm angry. I said, I can tell you are. Thankfully for me, I had already done my own work, and I knew his behaviors weren't about me. He got triggered, and he took it out on me. My old self would have matched him at his volume.
It'd have been toe to toe.
Absolutely. And then we couldn't have worked together again.
Right.
Because there would have been too much anger and resentment towards each other. But because I knew his behavior wasn't about me, I could tell him, I hear you. I can see you're upset. So I call him like 3 hours later because I wanted his brain to calm down. And I said, hey, could I explain my side? And I just said, I got to the office early. And he went, oh. What I didn't know is when I had gotten there early to do paperwork, is that the DHS supervisor called him and said, why aren't you here? You're wasting the therapist's time. Well, it triggered him. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about me. And so we were able to work together after that because I didn't personalize his behavior.
You didn't punish him for his reaction.
I didn't. It wasn't about me. And when we have that space where we can see someone's upset and it has nothing to do with us, it's what's going on in their brain, we can get to that place of commonality quicker. Because when you match someone's level of intensity of their behavioral and emotional triggers, you now then have a lot of repair work to do to get back to the original thing that you were.
Yeah, to the original position you were in before the reaction. Okay. And how do clients, how do they practice this, do you think, during the times between sessions?
I think, like you said, there's healing work that needs to be done. You got to heal some of those triggers that causes them to be reactive to begin with.
Okay.
And as they start doing that work, it gives them more ability to see the whole picture and see that it's not about them.
Okay.
That's kind of what I blend into the work I do, the EMDR, and being able to see the whole picture, not just our perspective of a situation. And I've had clients report, like I have a guy who was divorced, but the family all got together for holidays, even the exes, and how uncomfortable this was for him. And so and he would get reactive. He wouldn't behaviorally react, but he could feel it coming up.
Feel it coming up.
Yeah. And it would, like choke him and then make it miserable for everyone else because he's emoting all of these negative emotions during the holiday. And so we did a lot of this work, and he reported back after the holidays that he felt nothing, because he knew that his ex's behaviors weren't about him anymore. Those were her issues that she had to deal with, and he didn't have to deal with them anymore because, one, they weren't about him, and two, he wasn't married to her anymore.
Okay, so to kind of, from my point of view, trying to sum that up just a little bit. So as soon as we accept and recognize how our brain works and why our behaviors are what they are at times, then once they have that information and they've assimilated it, then they can work in the situation to say, that's not about me, that's about them.
Right. Yeah.
And I didn't cause that, and this is not my fault.
Right.
So do you find that it takes some shame out of some of their previous behaviors, that they're allowed to give themselves some compassion, or what some people call grace?
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
Because when you can kind of, because this is what we see, and it's our perspective, but there's the whole story going on that we don't see because of this.
Right.
And when we can take that down and see the whole thing and go, oh, it wasn't about me.
Like when you found out that the supervisor had called the guy and said, you're wasting her time.
Yeah. He kind of had an aha moment. It's like, oh, it wasn't about me telling everyone that he was late and why was he late and it's wasting my time. I didn't have anything to do with that.
Didn't even know it happened.
I didn't. So I knew it wasn't about me. Yeah. And for me, that place of being in a trigger, a hair trigger, anything happen, you're off. Which I experienced. I had my own trauma. I experienced it. I had reason to be angry. The ability to stand in front of someone and then be completely behaviorally and emotionally triggered, and me be able to stand in front of them and experience that with them without joining them is powerful.
Oh, so powerful and so freeing.
Free completely.
Because now I don't have to question anything, or not anything, but I don't have to question what I might have contributed to, because I didn't.
Right. And then you've got all that negative self-talk. When you separate from that, you're rehearsing all of those things that you've done or said, or what could you
going back through the situation, how many times trying to figure out what I did to cause that.
It wasn't about you to begin with. And if that's your starting point, look at how much more regulated you stay and emotionally peaceful than being triggered. Because when we get triggered, we all have an emotional age. And typically the emotional age is when we've experienced trauma. What is that age? And when we get triggered, our brain will go back to that emotional age.
Back to that.
Yeah. And so I started being abused around the age of 8 or 9. And so when I would get triggered, I would act like an 8 or a 9-year-old. My words would be adult words. And I won't go into detail about that. But I would act like an 8 or 9-year-old. Nah, I don't do that anymore. And it's been decades since I've done that. Because I don't have to, because I don't have the triggers anymore.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, but to sum that up is,
no one's behaviors are about you. Your own behaviors and reactions are about you, and everyone else's behaviors and reactions are about them.
Okay. Thanks, Kelly. That's very informative. So we'll be doing we'll be doing some more of these. So continue to join us on LifeTalk with Janice and Kelly.
Be sure and like and subscribe.
Oh yeah, that too.
All right. I'll see you next time.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.